From allegations of bribery to suspension, finally, the embattled Chief Justice of Nigeria, Walter Onnoghen, resigns. Are they bandits? Are they terrorists? What is Nigeria's government doing about the dozens of people that have been killed in Zamfara? This is a question that a lot of people have been asking on Twitter and, of course, on other media platforms. This is Plus Politics, and I am Onnoghen. The suspended Chief Justice of Nigeria, Walter Onnoghen, has resigned voluntarily, according to somebody on his legal team, I beg your pardon. He said, I have a senior advocate of Nigeria in the studio this evening, and we're going to be talking about this issue. Apparently, a lot of people have been on opposing sides on this particular issue. There are some who are for and some who are against. The NBA, of course, have said that, look, Mr. President did not get it right with the modus operandi, but I'm not a lawyer. I have a legal personality in the studio. I feel a bit, I and my other guests feel a bit, worried that we will be outlawed in this case, but I have the honor of introducing Osaro Eghobamien. He is Eghobamien. I wrote it right so that I could pronounce it. Osaro Eghobamien. He is a senior advocate of Nigeria. And I have Ihechukwu Ibeji. He's a political analyst in the studio. It's good to have you join us, gentlemen. I'm sorry I murdered your name, sir. It's good to have you in the studio.
Thank you.
I'm going to start with you, Mr. Osaro. I just want to find out from you, what do you think about the suspension of the CJN, or now former, because he has tendered his resignation, the trial at the CCT, and all the things that led up to this in the first instance? Because most people, when they're making this argument, they trace it to the reason why the CCT had him on trial in the first instance. As somebody who is an officer of the law, officer of the court, what do you think about, everything that led up to all of this?
Well, I think that in discussing these issues, we must focus on what is fact as opposed to fiction. So what we got to hear was that he'd been presented with his sworn statement as to the declaration of his accounts. And the allegation was that there were certain accounts that had not been declared, which obviously could amount to various offenses, starting from the non-declaration itself and moving on to the possibility of a money laundering offense, because what the allegation was that he'd had funds which were far beyond what he would normally earn as a civil servant. Therefore, there were a number of issues that could lead to being tried and convicted. That was the beginning of the problem. When he was presented with these allegations, there was no outright denial. And then he was taken to the Code of Conduct Bureau, a tribunal. The fact that there was no denial in itself is significant. And the way you protect institutions of this nature, judicial institutions as well as the legal institutions, is that when an allegation of that sort is made against you in private, it's usually made in private, because the status of the person concerned is such that you would, rather than invite him to the police station, you would normally visit him and then present him with whatever the issues
Why
were.
is that priority given to a person like Walter Onnoghen? And, it makes it sound like, not necessarily that they're above the law, but, the law sees them a certain way. Why?
Yes, I was just going to that. The reason is because he occupies a very sensitive position, and that institution is sacrosanct. Therefore, what normally happens, the culture, is that if he's presented with those allegations, and he suspects, in this case, he knew that it was true. In other words, he had accounts that he had not been declared, and there was a possibility that he'll be tried. You tender your resignation almost immediately. And in tendering that resignation or retirement, you will simply say for personal reasons. Now, it will be left to speculation why you actually left. This has happened in the UK, it happened all over the world. The truth is, it is I mean, it is not unusual to err. In Nigeria, it's common. I mean, unfortunately, you now have corruption seeped into the judiciary so badly that it appears common. But the fact is, in other parts of the world, you do have these situations, but you will just tender a resignation. I give you a typical example. Lord Devlin in England was 58. He was a very brilliant judge. It's alleged that he had been driving without his driving license. Nobody knows what actually happened, but he's been stopped by the police. A week later, he tendered his resignation for personal reasons. Up till today, it's still a debate why he did. But it is said that it was to protect the institution, to protect the integrity of the institution. That's why quite a number of us were appalled when the Chief Justice refused to either retire or resign when he was confronted with this allegation. Regardless, to be quite honest, whether it's true or not. That is the sacrifice you pay when you sit on that kind of exalted position.
All right, I'll come back to you. Now, Ihechukwu Ibeji, you are an analyst, so of course you will look at this from a different angle. There are people who make a case that this was political. This was not necessarily, yes, as much as there's a crime allegedly committed, there would have been better ways of dealing with this issue. But the fact that everything had to go within a certain speed of light, there was some political undertone to it. Do you agree or not?
Well, I think that we need to look at this a bit more from the holistic point of view. Holistic in that you must agree with me that the judiciary, the sacrosanct, the importance of keeping that keeping it very sacrosanct, keeping it very firm, strong, is very important. And why that is so is because when allegations such as this nature permeate down into the judiciary and begins to fly up and down, people lose hope. And so for each layer of government, people hold on to them as a major point of hope: executive hope, judiciary hope, legislature hope. Now, judiciary is a place where every common man brings his case, and you're judged dispassionately, and then your case is either you're found guilty or not. So now why I'm saying this is because I look at the case in the manner of, irrespective of whatever political undertones that may be read into it, quite frankly, protecting the judiciary was very, very important. So yes, now a lot of analysts have come out to say, like, the steps taken in removing him, in suspending him from office were not nice and had some political undertone to it. Why would the CCT come forward to be the ones to advise that he should be suspended, and all of that? But at the end of the day, it still boils down to the personality who is occupying that office. Now, just as the legal practitioner said here, just as he has said here, he was there. Everything was put on the table for the CJN. All he had to do was to look through. This at the highest level of the profession. All he had to do was to seek advice on the best way forward. All
right, back to you, Mr. Eghobamien. I hope I get this name sometime soon. There are some people or some lawyers who came to, the rescue of the CJN. There were lots of people who came to his defense, backing him, saying it's not necessarily about the crime, it's about the modus operandi, the procedure, that two wrongs don't make a right, I'm sure that you're on the other side of the fence, obviously, because you made that clear at the beginning. And then there are also another school of thought who think that the NBA are an embarrassment because of the number of CJNs, or rather the SANs, who backed him when he went to the CCT. What can you say about that?
Well, I think you need to put them in compartments, and you've made a number of points. Let's deal firstly with the fact that quite a number of senior advocates went to defend the CJN. I think he has a right to be defended. What perhaps might be improper or maybe a misconduct is where you go and defend the CJN, he not having instructed you. We're beginning to see that a lot, where a lawyer is perhaps indicted and you find so many lawyers just going there on their own will. Now you're mistaking that with a political trial, like that of Mandela or Awolowo. Two different things. This is an allegation of a crime. You don't just wake up and go and defend on a conviction that he's been alleged to have committed the crime, even though that allegation is false. Once it's a crime of that nature, it's not treason, it's not a political crime, it's theft. It's a money laundering issue. You're living above your means. There are possibilities that people have influenced your decisions. People have gone to jail wrongly. People have lost their livelihoods because the Chief Justice now, we perhaps suspect, had been influenced. So that's one issue. The question of he being defended, you can have lawyers defending him if he instructs them. I'm not sure that many of the lawyers who attended were instructed. That's really the point. But again, I speculate because I don't know.
But can we also talk about the executive here? Because again, I didn't read law, so I might not know a lot about it. But then the people were saying there is a way to go about this, and the executive did not do that. And the judiciary, which is also an arm of government, which is independent, has a way of doing things, which means those on the bench, I'm guessing, that's the Judicial Council, are supposed to handle this and then hand it over to the executive. But this wasn't done. So does that not fault the whole process in itself?
All right, you start from a premise that there is a particular procedure by which you deal with judges. That's the premise from which you start. There is a debate as to what that procedure is meant to deal with. So where you have, for example, a crime committed by a sitting judge, the argument is that that judge needs to be taken to the NJC, the National Judicial Council, and the National Judicial Council will deal with that issue. But many of us believe that they're there to simply deal with judicial misconduct, not criminal allegations. They're limited, they're not a court. So I think the arguments were a bit misplaced, where everyone just said, well, he must be taken to the NJC. Now, true, he can be taken to the NJC because if there's an allegation of theft or money laundering or living above your means, there are a combination of things there. There's a misconduct, there's also the issue of theft. But one thing is clear, the NJC cannot deal with the issue of theft. It can deal with the issue of misconduct. But the argument is that you must take him first to the NJC, and the NJC will make his recommendations. In this case, it is said that he was taken straight to the CCT without going to the NJC, and then subsequently the CCT had passed some ruling, an award or judgment to say, well, not judgment, but it was a ruling, to say that the president, director, the president should actually suspend him. There's a complicated procedure by which you can remove the chief judge. Now, that's a fact. And that procedure is you go to the NJC, and then you get a 2/3 majority from the House, the Senate, and then you can remove him. That procedure was not followed. Instead, he was hauled straight before the CCT. Now, because there was an allegation which the CCT had a jurisdiction to deal with, you now have a situation where the NJC on the one hand deals with misconduct, and the CCT deals with some level of criminality, just a non-disclosure of assets. So the complaint is that the NJC should have been attended to first,
in the first instance,
before going to the CCT.
Yes.
So that's the technical
And my question
point.
again is, does that not make rubbish of the whole process?
Not at all. And this is where I disagree with many of my colleagues. Of course not. What you have is a technical procedure that needs to be followed, okay? And then you need to put everything in context. It is true that perhaps the NJC should have the first attention to this issue. at a point, that's when we need to put it in context, we are told, and I think that's the truth, that the NJC was to sit to deliberate over this matter. And this is where you have a gap in the whole system. The Chief Judge, the Chief Justice of Nigeria, is the head of the NJC. And he used his power and overbearing influence to suspend the sitting of the NJC.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, correct. So this is the story. I agree with you there. Now, but he suspended the sitting of the NJC, where these matters would have been dealt with, and then there's recommendations made. So the NJC did not sit. Again, allegedly, I suspect the executive panicked. An application was made to the CCT. The CCT granted that application. We're not sure in what circumstance, but they granted that order. Now, because the executive acted on an existing order, and until that order is set aside, we say that the executive must have acted in accordance with the law, because the courts can direct, CCT can direct. Now, I don't believe that that order, is an order that ordinarily should be issued, but it was issued. We need to investigate the circumstance in which such an order was issued. Okay?
All right. But we'll come back to what needs to be done if we find ourselves in a situation like this. But I'm coming back to you, Ihechukwu. Yeah. Now that he has decided to tender his resignation, he's resigned. Some people are saying it's medicine after death. This is what he should have done, which was the honorable thing, although we never do anything honorable in this part of the world. But now that he's tendered his resignation, what do you think that every other public office holder who's in his position should learn from this process? Yes, it's messy, because we still sound like we're speaking from both sides of our mouths. It should have been done this way, it should have been done that way, but well, the deed is done. How do we make sure that these kind of things don't happen again? And how does the legal profession also still stay as sacred as it used to be seen? Because right now, there's still people who would still say that the executive, were a bit overreaching in this situation.
Well, first, I'll go straight to answer your question. Then I'll look at a few things supporting it. I think that for any public office holder who is under such an allegation, I think the first thing you need to do is to recuse yourself of that position.
But that doesn't happen. You see,
no, hold on.
I like all the beautiful talking that we're doing. Just hold on. I love the beautiful talking that we do when we're on TV, but in reality,
I'm actually coming there. And I've appeared here and we've appeared here times without number, and we bring the reality the way it is.
Exactly.
It will not happen. That is a problem that we're facing in this part of the country. Now, the CJN was facing that issue, and at the point where he was sitting, he had influence over his own case. A man cannot sit over his own case. So, at every point in time, it became like a toss, and that's where the political undertone came in. It became like a tussle between the executive and the judiciary, because, hey, the executive and their agents, the EFCC and the ICPs, are saying, look, you have a case to answer. And he's sitting on his seat, and he controls, or he almost controls almost all the arms of the judiciary that report to him. All right? And he's there sitting down there, and he's not making any move, he's not leaving. So they have to find a way to make sure that he leaves. Now, under normal circumstances, and in other countries, he should actually step aside. At least recuse himself of that position while the case is being investigated and looked at. But no, he did not. And that is why it took the depth in which it took. Now, the executive looking at it and saying, okay, they look at the Senate. At that point in time, the executive is not exactly having a rosy relationship with the Senate. So they said to themselves, we're not going to get a 2/3 majority in here. Right? And so the CCT remains the point of view where they can get some sort of relief. And guess what? That relief comes. Now, if the order given to the federal government to recuse him or to suspend him was the right one, that one is another situation that, needs to be looked into. But guess what? The whole affair, it just bubbles and leaves such a bad taste in the mouth. Leaves such a bad taste in the mouth, Because if truly these men who take the oath of offices are men of honor, Quite frankly, if there's an allegation against you, you should step down. You should step down.
I'm still going to
let me also say something else. It also does not just leave a bad taste in the mouth. It leaves the people. The people look at the judiciary now in a very strange manner, some sort of suspicion, if I may, because this case now they're saying to themselves, now if this can happen to him. This is the man at the highest office of the land. And if you recall, it took quite a long time before the president. In fact, the president was not around when he was confirmed. It was the vice president who acted, the acting president who confirmed him. So people are now beginning to look at it. Okay, what is this? Was this clear to him before he refused to confirm him? And these are issues that just makes the whole thing
well, that's
so
a whole kettle of fish on its own. But back to you, Mr. Osaro, just in closing, because we do not have time. Two-part question. Why is it so difficult for us to be honorable people? Whether you're a politician, whether you're an executive in an office, it seems to be a hard sell to say, be a good person, step aside. I mean, just as you said, in other climes, a man is just merely facing allegations. Let's say, for example, a district attorney. He steps aside until the investigation is over. Why is it so difficult for us in this part of the world to be honorable men? And how soon can the legal profession get back to its place of glory?
Okay. The first question, the difficulty of having people resign, it's a culture we got from the common law, and therefore there were no rules that attend to people at certain status because they were groomed and they were cultured to act in a particular way. That's the same thing that is happening here. There's a locana in the law, which means that this Chief Justice of Nigeria is expected to act in a particular way. That's why there's so much powers that he had, and that's why he was an investigating power without any provisions to investigate him that was independent of him. So it was born out of that system where you expected that he was totally above board. Unfortunately, around the world, not just in Nigeria, standards have lowered. So people have introduced rules. So in Australia, judges are expected to file their returns on how they live their life. So if you spend a particular amount every month, you file a return saying that. In the UK, you have agent provocateur following people who are judges or judges.
But that's where there is accountability. In this part of the world, how accountable are we? We need to go,
that is why we now need systems and mitigating circumstances that will exclude judges from this temptation. So we can't leave it just to them living above board. You know.
We need to go.
I think that it should be put into law. It should be put into law that once any public office holder, and because we tend to rush to the Constitution a lot.
When are we going to have this constitutional amendment? What year is this going to happen?
Law that once any public office holder is being investigated or there's an allegation against the person should step down while the case is being looked into, being investigated. That gives transparency to whatever situation that's on ground. Because a man cannot be judged. He can't be judge and jury over his own case.
I hope that this happens sometime soon. But I want to say thank you very much to the Senior Advocate of Nigeria in the studio, Osaro Eghobamien. I got it right this time. And of course, Ihechukwu Ibeji, political analyst. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. It's been an interesting conversation. We'll take a break, and when we return, we'll be talking about all the deaths in Zamfara State. It's a pretty sad one. We'll be right back.